Pandora Mabai is an advocate of change. I'm a child of God. I love God with all my heart. I'm an inspirational speaker. I am a voice for women who die in silence. I am a mother. I am an events coordinator. I am a leader. And I am a wife someday. Pandora's background, I am born and bred out of Ikukuletu, but my origins are Eastern Cape, Etowa, Msobomvu. My late grandfather, Usiolo Thompson Mabai, was born out of Butterworth in the Eastern Cape. And my grandfather, he left the Eastern Cape when he was 19 years of age, and he went to reside in Cape Town. That is where he fell in love with my grandmother while they were very young in Cape Town. My grandmother's origins, she was from Alex, Johannesburg, and they met in Cape Town, and my mother and her siblings were born in Cape Town. My grandfather and my grandmother raised their children in Cape Town. Their children were born and bred out of Cape Town. Out of my mom, I was born. And I was born and bred out of Ikukuletu, Section 2, Cape Town. We were raised in a very strict Christian background. My grandfather, coming from the Eastern Cape and being a village boy, I assume, he took all those characteristics and who he was, and he brought the village boy into a city. In the way that he raised us, you would find that we were not allowed to play with other kids. We were this family that it was all about you play with your cousins and your siblings. You go to school on a Sunday. It's all about church. And as a young girl, for me, I always wanted to know, but what is life like on the other side of the fence? Because when you go to school, you get to socialize with other children from different backgrounds, and you will hear different stories where other kids are going out and doing certain things. But whenever I used to raise Ukoti, I would love to go and do a sleepover, or I would love to go and visit a friend. My grandfather always used to ask this one question: "Yintoni ozayivuna echomini? Yintoni enizayincokola?" So I think I used to think he's backwards, and there were times I used to hate him for the way that he used to treat us. But now when I look at my life in the years later and how I was brought up, he was only trying to teach me our own family values, morals, principle, culture, and who we are. Because being a young black girl that was coming from Ekukuletu and going to Model C schools, obviously there is a transition that is happening in your life. And with that, for me, it was about I need to be a cool kid. I need to fit in, knowing that at the same time I'm coming from this background. So he really tried to give us what he thought was best for us. And in most cases, for me, I used to think that he's a pharaoh of that age. And my friends at school, they used to say, "Oh, you come from the pharaoh's house, the way things are, where you're not allowed to go to parties, you're not allowed to do other things that other kids were doing." And I became a very curious child from a very tender age, that what is life like on the other side? And I think that was always at my subconscious mind, because as I started growing up and I started maturing, there was only thing I wanted. I wanted a ticket that was going to take me out of Cape Town, and all I wanted was just Johannesburg. But there was a sacrifice that came with it, that you need to go to school. If you want to study in Johannesburg, you need to first finish your high school. So I did my years of high school. I went to Gardens Commercial High School up until grade 11. And then from there, I left and I went to Progress College. That is where I got my grade 12. And I remember when I was done with grade 12 and the excitement of my family, because none of my family, meaning my mom and her sisters, had matric. So the excitement of the family on the day that the results were coming out, that whole excitement of we need to get the newspaper. This is our first grandchild who's going to be on the paper as a matriculant. It was an achievement for me. I felt like I have achieved something that will rewrite history for my family. And after that, I was like, okay, guys, now it's time for me to leave. But there were still boundaries. There were still rules. There were still principles. There were still things that were guarding me that not yet, you can't do Joburg, do your first year. So they kept stretching it. And I'm like, but no, but you said I must finish my grade 12. And now I got my grade 12. And they were like, no. You are still young. We think you should do your first year in Cape Town. And then after your first year, we can reconsider. Maybe you'll go to Johannesburg. And I did my first year at Varsity College, Randebosch, studying marketing IMM. And after I finished my first year, that was the only time I got a ticket for me to be able to leave Cape Town. But even with that, in terms of geographics, they were like, no, not Johannesburg. And my grandfather always had this perception that Joburg is not a good place for a young kid. Yes, we have dreams, but he always said, and back then as a child, I never used to understand. And now that I'm based in Johannesburg, the fast life, the hustle, the chasing of money, everyone wanting to succeed, even if you tramp on other people for you to get what you want. I understand where he was coming from when he used to say that. And back then I didn't understand. So I was only allowed to go to Port Elizabeth. And I was like anything to get myself out of home. And my second year, I took a transfer from Varsity College, and I went to Varsity College in Port Elizabeth, Green Acres. I enjoyed my varsity in PE because when I got to PE, I could go clubbing. I had no family curfews. I dropped church immediately. I was like, I am not going to be going to church. I am done. And all I wanted was my freedom. I wanted to be a cool kid. I wanted to be free. I wanted to fit in. And I enjoyed each and every moment of that phase of my life. I have no regrets because as I grew older, I learned that life is about blessings and lessons. Had I not gone through everything that I went through and the freedom that I was looking for, and actually go and experience that freedom, I would not be the speaker that I am today, because I believe that experience is the greatest teacher. When you speak from something that you have experienced, when you speak from something, a road that you have traveled, you are able to speak with wisdom and able to impart and impact lives from a space of motivation, encouragement, and inspiration. And I've always been the girl that loves writing. I've always been a writer. I've always been that child that used to sit with my elders. I never used to sit like sitting with my siblings and my cousins. I wanted to sit with the elders, and I would always have this voice. Whenever they're speaking about their problems, I'll have this voice that is giving advice, and I would get into trouble. So I guess speaking chose me. It is what I was born with. It's a gift that I was born with. Hence, in my later years, I became an inspirational speaker. When I finished my studies in Port Elizabeth, all I wanted was the city of gold. So I remember at that time, the guy that I was dating, he was already working, and I just finished schooling at the time, and he arranged with his friends that were already in Johannesburg so that I could come and squat with them while I'm looking for a job. When I came to Joburg, I was taken in by Ufundiswa Zigogo. I stayed at Sunnyside Flats. Now it's a Holiday Inn in Pretoria. That is where, when I got here, that is where I stayed, and I looked for a job. And within a month, I was here. I found a job. My first job was with Auto in General, doing call center work with my marketing IMM. But at that moment, it's always about you need to start somewhere for you to get somewhere. So I moved out of Pretoria, and I came to Johannesburg, and I stayed in a guest house at the time, and I was working in Auckland Park, and I started meeting people in the professional world, making new friends, being able to go to nightclubs. Every time you get paid, you know that I'm busy collecting like my dishes, my pots, but you put aside money for your entertainment because I'm living it up. I'm working. I've got my own money. I can be able to do my own things. I'm living my best life, so that I thought, because at that moment I am moving on, I am free. There's no family that I'm reporting to. There's no one that is telling me what to do. And was the beginning of my career life in the professional world. So when I was young, I was always the one that was always giving advice. I was always the one that was coming up with solutions, even amongst the elders. So I believe I always had the gift of a healing voice, and I always had the gift that comes with wisdom, that comes with solutions to problems. So even in varsity, whenever my friends had boyfriend issues, or people had money that was sent to them, and maybe they were supposed to buy textbooks and they ended up using the money maybe for clubbing or partying, I always came with a solution and a strategy on, okay, fine, let's probably club up, or we can share my textbook. I was always the child that people could come to. People were very drawn to me, and I never used to understand what is it with me that people were drawn to me. So even at varsity, varsity college is a private college. It's got no res. So I had a flat by the beachfront in Port Elizabeth in Humud. So the students who were staying at UPE, PE Tech, people were always at my flat. A friend of mine would come with a friend, and whenever we were together, it was always about me speaking, sharing, talking about. I remember I've got a friend, Ukanyisa. Kanyisa always says, Pandora, are you aware that the person that you've become, you are always telling us that, you know what, guys, I'm going to have a Pandora's Box company. I'm going to speak for a living. I'm going to travel around the world. My voice is made for the world. And at that moment, I did not know, because all I was told at home, go and study, and then go and work. And for me, here I was busy speaking of my future and manifesting my future. And I was unaware at that moment, because Kanyisa, like now, it's a friendship of 18 years. She says to me, everything you have become. Used to tell us that you're going to write books, translate the books in different languages. You are going to be standing in front of people and speaking, and you're going to be motivating people. Back then, I didn't know the how, but clearly it's a gift that I was born with, because I've been a voice in people's situation, in people's dramas. I remember even when a friend of mine who was from Johannesburg, who was studying at AAA in Port Elizabeth, she used to misuse her funds. And I took her in at my flat for us to journey through together. And if someone else looks at that today, I was just a student at that time. People call it life coaching. So I took in Udoli, a girl from Joburg, and I was saying, look, I want to walk this journey with you. I want to help you to make better goals, make better decisions, use the things that you have. And I believe even then I was a life coach, but I was unaware. And boom, here I am. Years later, I walked into all that I was born to be. And I'm a speaker now, and I move around the globe, and I do inspirational speaking. In my career path, I grew from Auto in General. I could move to L'Oreal, and I was climbing the corporate ladder. But while I was climbing the corporate ladder as a marketing IMM graduate, life happened. I hit rock bottom, and I had to go back to Cape Town. And I remember going back to Cape Town, sitting, and I think in most cases, we reach out to God when we are at our lowest. And I have taken that to say, when you are on your knees, you can stand before anyone when you get up. So there I was, building this relationship with God, praying daily, reading my Bible, trying to make sense of who I am. But I knew that there was a bigger thing inside of me. The voice, I knew that my voice needed to be heard, but I didn't know how. And I started doing an introspection on myself, on the landmarks that I went through in the fast lane that I was living, partying, doing the things that I was doing, thinking that that was liberty. But those were lessons for me to grow and come back to true self. And I remember at that time, I even asked my mother while she was at work. I'm so blessed to have my mom. I asked her to bring me a cupboard, like a cardboard that you do. You know, when you're in school and you're doing projects, I said to my mom, you know what? I actually need that cardboard. I started having visions, and I was cutting pieces of papers from magazines, and that was the time I actually put together my very first vision board. And the characteristics that came out of Pandora were: Pandora is an advocate of change. Pandora is a voice for women who die in silence. Pandora is a mother someday. Pandora is a wife someday. Pandora is an events coordinator. Pandora is a leader. And I said, how am I going to do all of these things? And I knew that my story became an inspiration, that how many other young girls go through what I went through. And I knew that my voice needed to be heard. And while I was in Cape Town, there's a lady who called me, my very first speaking gig as an inspirational speaker, Uma Jaji. She called me in the year 2010, end of 2010. And at that time, I am down and out in Cape Town. And she said to me, look, I know of your story. I know what you went through. The tabloids are talking about you. I would love for you to come and share your story. So she was putting together this event in a plot in Pretoria. She was an events coordinator at the time, and she was putting together this women conference where she had executive women, doctors, CEOs, women from different walks of life. And she was gathering this woman, and she said to me, I remember on the phone, she said to me, I want an authentic story that is going to inspire people. I am not looking for a motivational speaker. I am looking for an inspirational speaker. And I feel with your story, you'll be able to reach the goal and fulfill the purpose that my event is all about. And I told her that I'm in Cape Town, I'm down and out, I don't have money. And she said, don't worry, we'll take care of your flight to come to Johannesburg. She flew me in. That was the unleashing of the Pandora's box. That moment on that stage, when women who are sitting as an audience were crying, hearing my story, I knew that my journey has begun. I knew that it was the opening of the Pandora's box. And from there, all I wanted was just to use my gift to speak and change people's lives. That was the gig that gave birth to Pandora Mabai, the advocate of change.